All right. Well, now, Vintage Gliders Australia is one group of people, and they are actually the people who fly gliders, fly vintage gliders, own vintage gliders, and have vintage rallies. And we have vintage rallies in a number of states in Australia, but the COVID's interfered with us a bit this year. We had a 7-day rally at Bordertown the first week of January, which was the national rally. So that was great fun and worked really well. And then we had a meeting at Bacchus Marsh during the March Labor Day weekend, and that was for 3 days. And that was run by Vintage Gliders Australia, except on the Sunday, the Australian Gliding Museum, which is a totally separate organisation, but a lot of our members are in both, held their annual general meeting, open day, and barbecue lunch. So we had that in March. And then the Hunter Valley Gliding Club at Easter weekend held a rally at Singleton, New South Wales, that went across the Easter weekend and the following week. And quite a few of us went there. This photograph was taken there. And so they have a lot of fun. So I'll run through the photos now and give you a bit of a rundown as we go through. Hopefully it'll work. There's a couple of guys. I don't know if anybody knows Grant Nelson. He's the full-time guy at Lake Keepit. If you fly into Lake Keepit, he's the guy you're likely to meet on the airfield. And that, can you see that? That's Jenny flying a Skylark 4 glider at the Hunter Valley Rally. And behind her is a Hunter 28, which is it's a design of quite a few years ago, but a fellow in Newcastle recently built that one from scratch. It's built all out of wood, and it's quite a small glider, and he's about 6'3", but he still manages to fit in it. As you can see, it's got a gull wing and very nice to fly. So that's a great achievement to have built that glider. Here we've got a scene on the airfield with the Moreli M200 two-seater, which is an Italian two-seater imported to Australia, flying up there. And just behind it is a Aviation, which is a Polish designed and built two-seater imported to Australia. So when we're not flying gliders, or if it gets dark, we start building models. You can see lots of models there.
Oh, after the soaring stops.
Well, it's dark, yeah, after the dark. And so now we're moving on to the Australian Gliding Museum, totally separate organisation. It wasn't started until 1998, so it's just over 20 years old, and they've achieved a huge amount. They've got hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of assets. This particular shed is our main, was built as a workshop and storage area, but in fact it's become our main building, and we've got we're looking after 71 gliders now in our care. So this is preserving Australia's history right back to the beginning, and we pretty well take anything we can get that's of any historical significance. So it's all about history, and it's all about saving the what happened was, in the 1960s, they introduced fiberglass gliders. The first one was 1957, and we've got an example of that. 1957, there was a prototype run of 9 gliders, and we've got one of those in Australia. So we're very lucky to have that particular aircraft, but it's all fiberglass. Up until then, they were all wood and fabric, but the problem was the performance of fiberglass aircraft was so good that they were pushing the wooden aircraft out of the hangars and putting their new, shiny, expensive fiberglass gliders in there. And this was causing all the old wooden stuff to be left out in the weather or stuck in rafters and deteriorating badly. So fortunately, the museum came onto the scene, and you know, Jenny and I have been as far as Perth to collect gliders. One that came out of the rafters at the Narrogin hangar, and another one, and we've got around 70 aircraft all upcoming. So we've saved these aircraft. What are we going to do with them? We've built this rack. On top of that, the Australian Gliding Museum has constructed some replicas. And this is a replica of the Lilienthal glider that he flew in 1897. And Otto's hanging underneath the thing there. And this is a direct replica that's built of a copy of the original aircraft, which is in the Smithsonian Institute. So everything about that is as exact as we can make it with the original aircraft, except that we decided to leave it uncovered so that it could be seen. And Otto is actually a cross-dresser because we couldn't find a male mannequin. But otherwise, it's a legitimate, fully authentic replica that we've been able to make. So we built a replica of the Taylor glider. The Lilienthal was built by Bruce Hearn, who's related with Hearn's hobbies. So anyway, moving on, we built a replica of, well, actually built 3 replicas of the Taylor glider. The Taylor glider is the first heavy on air man-carrying glider in Australia. And this is a real, as genuine as we can make it, replica of the original that flew on the 5th of December 1909 at Narrabeen Beach. The pilots of the day was Charles Taylor and his wife Florence, who became Australia's first woman glider pilot. And there was the Schultz, Mr. and Mrs. Schultz, and also a young man was helping by the name of Edward Hallstrom. And Edward Hallstrom went on to build refrigerators, so you might have heard of him. So we've got 3 of these, which one is hanging in the entry to one of the main museums in Canberra, I believe. This is the second one, and the third one we also have. So Lawrence Highgraves, who flew the kites, you might remember at Stanwell Park, Stanwell Tops in 1896, I think it was, but he was involved in this particular program. And you can see this is the tail of the Taylor glider. You can see the box kite affair that he's built the tail like that. So a significant replica, that one. On this one, there's a blue glider here. Can you see my cursor, someone?
Yes, yes.
Okay, well, that blue glider there, it looks like a farm gate. There's the seat and the stick, and it's got a billy cart stick across the bottom for the rudder pedals, and that's what they were using in the 1920s and 30s around the place to fly. And this is one that we've had flying. I had a flight in it quite a long time ago at Benalla. Fairly frightening, quite exciting, but they were using those to go jumping off hilltops and soaring the slope lift on the hilltops mainly. So that's one of the original primary gliders that we have restored. So this one is from 1942, 1943, the American Schweitzer 232, I think it was. Anyway, a Schweitzer 2-seat trainer that is in need of restoration, and we'll get around to it one day. So a Gruno, sorry, no, that's actually a Hutter, one of the gliders that we've got restored. I'm hoping to see another glider. Actually, these photos aren't quite right. I'm sorry, they're not in the order that I've posted them in. That's a photograph of a Kookaburra. For those who aren't familiar with a Kookaburra, the student sits in the front left-hand seat. and the instructor sits in the right-hand rear seat. Gives you a bit of extra shoulder room because it's quite a small glider for two people. They built many of these. Edmund Snyder in Adelaide had a factory there and produced this one. And there's, I'm not sure of the number off the top of my head, but they built many tens of these gliders and sold them to all the gliding clubs in the 1950s and 60s. I learned to fly on one of these in 1963. This one here is the famous Golden Eagle. Golden Eagle was designed and built by a young man, Jeffrey, what's his name, Jim? Jeff Richardson. Jeff Richardson designed and built this before the war, and he did quite a good job. It's a very, very neat glider, a bit complicated. The gull wings in the way they used to build them in the early 30s. And I think it was 1937 that he first flew this one. And they also brought out a German Gruno baby. And there was a Gruno baby also flew its first flight in Australia on the day that Jeff flew this one the first time. But this was given to the museum in later years. But because of its absolutely fantastic heritage and uniqueness, we in the museum don't fly it. It's in flying condition. So the gliders there, like I say, these are not the photos I was hoping to bring up, but that's a Moreli Italian two-seater, Italian single-seater, similar to the KA6, not quite as good a performance. And that's a Schneider Arrow. I'll click through these a little bit because they're not really what I wanted to show you. But the one on the right here is quite interesting because it's actually what they call a nacelled primary. It's got the farm gate type fuselage at the back that they built a nacelle for pilot comfort and security and safety, no doubt, in the front. So this one was built by Ray Ash. Unfortunately, Ray died before he completed it. So this one hasn't been completed, but one day we hope to get that completed and maybe even fly it. So in the 1960s, mid-1960s, the two-seaters that were marketed around the world were improving in performance considerably. You see now we've got tandem aircraft here, a bigger wingspan, about a 27 or 28 to 1 glide angle, and very good for basic training. And this one is the Schleicher. Schleichers are probably the biggest glider manufacturer in the world in Germany, and they produced lots of K7s, and there were quite a number came to Australia. However, the Poles weren't to be left out at the time behind the Iron Curtain, but they were exporting Boschens, and this is the Boschen two-seater, which also is quite a big and heavy glider with quite a good performance, 28 to 30 to 1 glide angle, somewhere in there. You can see we've got a Polish hat for it, but otherwise it's standard the way it was, in need of restoration as well. So we've got lots of stuff in the gliding museum, and we've got some models here that are flying, that are in flying attitude, and there's plenty to see and do. We've visited a few museums recently and only seen a couple of aircraft. Well, you certainly get plenty of aircraft at the Australian Gliding Museum, but we don't charge an entry fee. Entry is by donation. So this particular picture here is a bit better. It shows a few of our gliders and aircraft. The Golden Eagle there at the front, but this one here is the one that I mentioned earlier. It's the Phoenix F-24 glider, which is the first fiberglass glider in the world. They made 9 of them, and this particular one, I believe, is number 3. And the idea was that they were starting to use fiberglass to make non-structural fairings on wooden gliders, and they used the fiberglass for a while. Anyway, in the mid-1950s, they decided, well, hang on, this fiberglass stuff seems pretty strong. Let's build an aeroplane out of it. So they built this, and they actually built 9 prototypes. And there's one still flying regularly, and I believe it's number one, owned by Hans Dismer in Holland, and he goes to all the European rallies with his Phoenix. And it's a real floater. It's a lightweight fiberglass glider, and it'll float around all day and flies quite nicely and looks absolutely beautiful. And the fact that fiberglass didn't need to be in straight lines, it's got more curves than that in it than any other glider. It's absolutely beautiful glider, and you might notice there it's got a retractable undercarriage as well. So the performance is quite good, and certainly better than most wooden gliders of the day. So here we have a picture from what is actually above the archive room in our hangar. And I'd like you to look to the top of the picture, where you can see a structure made out of aluminium, and it's actually a homemade design by a fellow who was I believe he worked for GMH, and he did quite well. He invented a kind of a seal that they used as in story. But anyway, he retired to Woodend onto a small acreage property at Woodend, outside of Melbourne on the northwest. And he was watching the magpies, and he thought, well, I can build a magpie. I'm a pretty good engineer. So it was sort of, the wings were a bit shaped like a magpie's wings, but you lie on your belly in this, and your head goes in the bomb aimer's thing at the front there. And unfortunately, your head would get to the accident first. So he built the aircraft and finished it and covered it, and it was all ready to go. No previous flying experience. He built quite a large tower on the edge of a hill, which he was going to launch himself off with it, but with a ramp. And he unfortunately, he up and died before he killed himself in it. We've looked at it, it's got no longitudinal stability at all, nothing at the back, nothing in the way of a rudder at the back. And lying on his chest there, and that, we're a bit worried, but fortunately he didn't get to fly it, so we've got we've got the aircraft. However, we found that there was some corrosion getting into it. It was 1987, I think, that he died. We've got some corrosion in it, so we decided, well, we better strip it. We stripped it, stripped all the fabric off it, corrosion treated it, and we were going to cover it again, but we thought, by golly, to cover up all that beautiful workmanship would be sacrilege. So we've left it uncovered for people to see and admire, and it's quite an exhibit in the museum of a glorious aircraft that never got to fly. What do we have here? A bit of a mixture of models and the racks. We can move on. You can see the model down the bottom front there, the big one right across the screen. That's a Slingsby two-seater model. They've got a number of models. I do apologise, it's not really the program I was going to give you. There's a nice photo of the Phoenix. The T-31. T-31B is a Slingsby design from England, and there's quite a few Slingsby aircraft come to Australia. They were the biggest glider producer in the United Kingdom. And this one we still fly at our vintage rallies. It's kept airworthy. The back seat guy there, let's see. Yeah, there's our guy in the back seat. He's been waiting quite a while for his first student, but he's still sitting there. Of course, launching gliders has created a whole new world of inventive design. This one here, unfortunately, I don't think I can get the picture back down a bit, but the guy on the left is actually manually spreading the wire on the drum. You can see the drum and the shiny drum spinning at high speed, and they are actually in the process. If I had the full picture showing for you, you'd see the glider out in front in full climb attitude. I think the guy on the left spreading that wire, I don't think he'd pass occupational health and safety. If you ever stood beside a winch while it's doing a high-speed wind-in of of steel cable, you'd find the noise is bad enough, but if that wire breaks, it goes like shards and can be quite dangerous. So this is a winch that was used for many years, and initially I believe it didn't even have that wire protection around the driver there, because the driver sits in the driver's seat and he operates the accelerator and that sort of stuff to launch the glider, while the other guy spreads the wire on the drum. So this is a picture of our paint shop and the covered area for trailers. We seem to be going backwards. Anyway, now we're in the workshop. This workshop, kindly donated by Phil Krapolinas and Diane Davey. You can see it's a wonderful shed and gets lots of use, except during COVID. We've actually, because Bacchus Marsh is out of the lockdown area, we've managed to keep a skeleton team of people who aren't from Melbourne out there, and we've been working steadily on the gliders during the pandemic, and normally getting 4 or 5 people there, and it's a great workshop. There's one of our examples of a restoration that we're working on. That's a K8, Slideshow K8, originally kit built from German Sliker manufacturers, and it flew with the RAAF in the RAAF gliding clubs. So this particular K8 is a lovely aircraft, been restored very nicely. This is the one that flew up at Quirindi and all around the place. And we're looking, it was based in Williamtown, and we're looking at flying that aeroplane at the vintage rally that we're hoping to hold next Labor Day weekend in March. So this is something I'm really looking forward to. It's a floater, it'll stay up, it'll go up on nothing, and it's also beautiful condition. It's looking inside the cockpit, which is not quite finished, but you can see the quality of the workmanship that our team have put in on this particular aircraft. It's all been restored like it's brand spanking new. So we're working on a K4. This is a 2-seater tandem aircraft, and putting the skirt on the green fabric there that goes around the wheel area, absorbs, it covers the area where the spring skid that you can see there takes some of the shock out of ground handling and landing and takeoff, and there's a skirt that goes to that skid. So that's in process of being done. Another view of the workshop. The glider at the back there is the Olympia. The Olympia was after the Olympic Games were held in 1936. A man named Adolf decided that Germany actually is leading the world in gliding, and we could pick up a few gold medals here. So they were going to have the World Gliding Championships in Germany in 1940. And so they sent out 4 plans for a glider, and this particular plan was selected. And so they called it the Olympia for the Olympic Games, and the plans were sent around the world for anybody who wanted to build one and compete in the 1940 Games. So there's quite a few of these around, and you know, the aircraft dates back to the very early days of the late days of 1930s. However, they're very sweet to fly, and performance is typical of the era. You know, it's not going to set any world records, but it's a lovely glider to fly, and so there's still a few of them left around the place in Australia. And we're looking forward to getting that one restored as well. So here we've got the K7s, the K8 wings in the paint shop. The paint shop we enlarged. I think it's 8 meters long. I think we've expanded it to 11 meters long, and we can fit every aircraft and wing that we've got in the museum in there, except one. The Schneider Arrow has a one-piece 13-metre wing. So we've built a cubby house that we can assemble out the front door paint the Arrow's wing, but this paint shop is just fantastic. Gets a lot of use. Oh, this is a ring in. This is Jenny and I are members of the Geelong Gliding Club based at Bacchus Marsh. There are 3 gliding clubs based at Bacchus Marsh. If you're ever in the area, we'd love to see you come, and we can look at taking you for a fly. Now we're coming to the Office and Archive Centre. Lovely model of the Motorized there. I think you might get to see a couple more pictures. I'm just having a quick look. Yeah, there's another view of the Motorized from the early 1930s, the original aircraft. Quite a large model, beautiful gull wings. It's the one that what is it? They're based on the Motorized. Well, you know, the mini mower. Yeah, the mini mower. The mini mower they built in large numbers, the shorter span version. But this one is actually, the fiberglass pilots that come in and look around, have a look at this. But I say to them, what's the first aircraft to carry water ballast? And they'll reply, one of the hot fiberglass aircraft, the early hot fiberglass aircraft where they started using water ballast to increase the penetration, particularly in places like Australia where they can get high cross-country speeds. But this aeroplane in the early 30s actually carried water ballast to improve the penetration. Just gives you a higher speed at the same gliding angle. So if on a strong day, you can cover the ground quicker. And it carried a 10-gallon tank just behind the pilot that you filled up with water on a good day. Just a quick photo of the facilities we have for members. We were getting 25 to 30 volunteers a day before COVID came along, and having a good crew and a good team, and most of them were not quite as young as we are now. They were fairly, people who were nearly all ex-glider pilots, but they didn't have to be an ex-glider pilot. We've got plenty of jobs and plenty of things they can do, and this is a part of our the table that we sit down that goes right the length of the room there and carries all those people. You might remember in your history research of Fred Hoinville and his research on planks. Well, this is the single-seater plank which we've restored. Unfortunately, it had a little bit of damage done to it, and the person who donated it gave it to us, said it's too unstable to fly, so we don't want it to be flown. So we won't ever fly that one, but it's certainly unique and doesn't have anything behind the little cockpit there. So I'm not going to fly it, that's for sure. So there's the rest of the table, and those posters that you see along the wall, wonderful and informative posters. And our archivist, Bernie Duckworth, does those. This particular rudder was flying, I think it's 1929, 1930s. It was the Geelong Gliding Club, which is actually the first gliding club in Australia. So we're still going. The aerodromes that this primary was taken to fly, written there, as you can see, Tower Hill, Koroit, Lovely Banks, Mount Murray, Batesford, those sorts of places. So it flew at a number of places, but the next photograph is interesting. So just take a look at that checkerboard pattern on that rudder, and if it works, yeah. Towards the bottom left of this poster of Bernie's, you can see the same rudder. Everybody see that? It's the glider standing on its nose. That's how it came, that's how it landed. So, it's a historic aircraft. And incidentally, that guy in the middle there, that's Sir Charles Kingsford Smith flying a primary glider at Warrnambool, Kookaburra at 1932. And there's also a poster there, Young Australia Wants to Fly, Gliding the New Sport. It's a bit cheaper than paying 100 or 200 bucks an hour for a Cherokee these days. So there's some more of the archive centre. And I think, oh, that's a photo of the Golden Eagle again. I think we're pretty well through, guys. It's everybody, and you know, I'm open for questions if anybody'd like to ask anything, or if you're still awake. This is my first presentation. I don't have to tell you that. You've already picked that up. But anyway, thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. Okay.
I was just going to say that was very informative for somebody who's never. I've only flown in a glider once. I did a circuit once with a guy. I can't remember where it was. The thing I noticed most about that is how quiet it was. And I've only ever had one other experience of gliding, and that was in an F-51. Which I landed on a beach.
Well, that
made a bit of a mess.
would have been pretty exciting. Oh, really? Oh, gee whiz. Oh, well done to
Mustang glider.
save yourself as the airplane.
It didn't like landing on the beach much.
Oh dear. But you managed to keep it butter side up. Did you?
Oh, it
Yeah.
stayed the same side up, but the fuselage was broken at the back. The engine was over there and the wings were both bent up. It did a cartwheel.
Oh,
It was
gee
all sand dunes.
You wouldn't get 30 feet to one in that, that's for sure.
In fact, a young guy contacted me just recently. That was in 1952, and he said he's still found some of the wreckage of it. They towed it up the beach to the gunnery range and it just became a target. Poor old thing.
Oh,
It was a magnificent aircraft.
yeah. Yep.
The
So
engine quit at about 10,000 feet on my second flight.
Really?
Yeah.
Gee whiz.
Anyway, that's another story. But I did have this one circuit in the glider, and that was amazing. I was very impressed by the approach angle, which was quite shallow.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I started a job as an apprentice, and my boss turned out to be a gliding instructor.
Oh, wow.
And the rest is history.
The rest is history.
That was.
Can you tell me,
Yep,
does anybody ever have anything like a Horsa or any of those old World War II troop carrier ones? Would they exist anywhere?
Not.
At
I
least
don't
in
think
the
they
museum.
ever were used in Australia. Yeah. Yeah, as far as I know, they haven't been used in Australia. But Jenny's telling me they have restored some overseas. So
Would they fly
I'm
them?
sure you'd find them.
Would they
the
fly
UK.
them, or would they be?
Oh, I wouldn't think they'd be flying them.
No.
But what would you need, a Sterling or something to launch them with? Would you?
Yeah, DC-3.
DC-3? Yep. Oh yeah, there's a few DC-3s around.
Not in England or Europe anymore.
There's a beautiful one in the museum at Arromanch, as I think it is, and God, it's flimsy. You know, occupational health and safety wouldn't go near them with the barge pole these days.
What is that?
The Horsa glider.
Yeah. Oh.
And that's right, Horsa.
Mm.
But
Yanks had quite a few CG-4A gliders in Australia.
Blackos.
World War II.
Oh,
Yeah, they have one made a prototype, but it never went on with it. And,
yeah.
Imagine you wouldn't be able to do any soaring with those old horses because they'd be just low to the fairly low ratio.
exactly. And terribly heavily
They're
laden.
only made, just made for one flight, weren't they?
Oh, yeah.
Yep, and breaking in half on landing so that you can get the tank or the troops out in a hurry. Yeah.
The Grunow Baby was popular with the Headley youth, and a lot of the fighter pilots, learned to fly on a Grunow Baby. Did you say we had one in Australia?
Oh, there's a number of Grunow babies in Australia. Yes, so Grunow 2 is the Grunow 2 was the most prolific one built, I believe. But a number of those came to Australia. But there was a number of, I believe there was some built here. But the Schneider factory in Adelaide, when they got going in the 1950s, built the Grunow 4, what they call the Grunow 4. The Grunow 4 didn't look like, it was a lot lighter with a totally different wing section, much more streamlined. And they built how many of those? 4 or 5 of those, I think. 4 or 5 Gruno 4s. And our club had one, so I got quite a lot of hours in the Gruno 4, but it was a different glider than the Gruno 2 that they were flying before the war.
Hmm.
Yeah. And there's a guy still flying a Gruno at our vintage rally at Bordertown. Lee Bunting's got a Golf Delta November, I think it's called, the Gruno baby over there that he flies.
He's built in Australia from plans.
Right.
The grey Gruno was imported.
Mm-hmm. So
from Schneider, but of course Schneider's who were employing 400 people in their factory in Grunau, had to walk away from it with their shirts on their back because the border was changed after the war. So Schleikers, who were concurrent manufacturers with them in the country at the time, Schleikers continued on as if nothing happened after the war, but Schneider's had lost everything. And they eventually moved to Australia and set up factory here. So that's our only glider manufacturer in Australia has been Schneider's.
Yeah. Yeah, we had a Sliker ASK 21 flying one leg of the Geo Mail run in 2014 from to Wangaratta. So yeah, it was a lovely looking machine.
Yeah.
Now, gliders these days are a lot different. I have a nice photo among my presentation that I can't show you of an AS Alexander Slideshow K13, and a guy smiling his heart out who's just done his first solo in it. Jenny sent him solo a month or 2 ago on his first solo. So K13 is still flying and still doing a wonderful job, and it's a sweet glider to fly, and it's a great trainer. So the Geelong Gliding Club are sticking with their K13. It's got over 16,000 hours on it, which would be a lot for a powered aeroplane, but for a glider, it's a huge amount. And still doing the old workhorse flying, training, and teaching students to fly after all this time.
Yeah.
The value of wooden wings.
Yeah.
They don't fatigue.
Yeah, well, Powerhouse Museum, as I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, has got 2. It's got a plank. And I mean, you know, how anyone would fly that, which is virtually a wing with an egg underneath it. And the background was that the centre of gravity was so delicately poised because you had no leverage from the tail. And it had a tendency to turn over on landing. And a guy called Cielo, what his first name, made a beautiful wooden glider and a wooden powered helicopter, which is also in the Powerhouse Museum collection and not on show, which they should be.
Yeah.
Was that Reg Toddhunter's?
Yes, that's right.
Plank.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And frightening looking things to think of flying, and you know, very difficult to get balanced because you've got no leverage from your fuselage at all.
Yes, but of course he was looking for the performance advantage.
Exactly. Yeah.
His drag.
Yeah. I'll stick to elevators and rudder, I think.
What did you fly, Judy? You're flying gliders, haven't you?
Yes, I have. I've flown quite a number. I was interested, but it just tips out of the vintage. The Blanik gliders were the big ones made in Poland when I was learning to fly. But we had a Cherokee there built in timber by a carpenter called the Rubby Ducky, in other words, the flying brick. And of quite a number, the ASW, and then, of course, on into the fiberglass. But I was flying during the time that a couple of guys brought in the early motor gliders. And, of course, they had big problems getting them authorised by CASA with the limits on time to fly, etc., that were imposed. But it was a very interesting time to fly.
What year was this, Judy?
The interesting thing about it, Tom, is I was lucky enough to have amongst my instructors 4 ex-German pilots who had trained under Hitler in gliders before they switched to power. And I can assure you that before we built the clubhouse at Bathurst, sitting on a cold night round a hot fire with a very, very rough red wine, to hear their tales were like listening to some way out Hollywood movie. Fantastic tales, that's for sure. So there's a lot that could be written about it. But what wasn't mentioned was one of the Taylor gliders was brought up to Sydney for the centenary at Narrabeen, and John Scott and I were present there at the time when they were celebrating the Taylor's flight.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, the Blanick is an interesting, excellent training glider. Interesting in that there are not many of them flying now because, they're beautifully built. They were commissioned by the military. There was no expense spared in tooling up for them to build these wonderful machines. However, they suffer from fatigue, and they don't have a long life. So there are a couple flying in Australia now with David Llewellyn modification done to them to permit them to continue flying. But our museum has one that unfortunately fell foul of that life limitation and is now in the museum, and it won't ever fly again. Yeah.
I believe there was one order from the USSR for 700 Blanicks in one order.
Yes. They were incredible. I landed a Blanick once into a strong westerly in twice its own length. They were incredibly flyable.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, the flaps were easy to use on those too, weren't they? Yep.
Yes, yeah. No, they were a glider made to fly.
What sort of stalling speed would that have?
Practically none.
Hold
it on the rudder.
Yeah, around the 30 knots area there, if you had a bit of flap out and that sort of stuff,
Yeah.
Yep.
That's for sure.
But at that speed, you're not looking at the airspeed indicator, you're thinking, how the hell do I get out of this one?
Yes.
They had a partially retractable undercarriage too. It sort of came halfway up.
Yeah.
So if you forgot to put it down again, you had half a chance of not doing damage.
And you had to buy the bar of beer.
There was a good old movie they made about the is it called the Colditz Castle?
Oh yes.
RAF attempt to escape with one pilot from the castle, but it didn't work. It did fly though. They did launch it from the castle back in 90 or somewhere.
Yeah. It was.
Yeah, there's the replica is currently at Lasham in England in the Gliding Heritage Centre. Covered with spreadsheets. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very interesting aircraft.
I would like to ask, when did motorised gliders first start to appear? And I never see them at the RAAF, but I suppose they're used at some RAAF bases. Do you know anything about motorised gliders?
Oh, well, I'd say that, you know, home builders have been trying to install little engines in gliders, you know, I mean, most gliders, they just stick with the plan and build a glider, but if they want to do self-launching, then there has been quite a number of small engines, you know, put in some of these aircraft. We've had engines on sticks, a stick that you put behind the, you know, from the top down through the centre section of the wing that's above the wing. And that, of course, these days, they've got to the stage where the front electric sustainer engine has got folding propellers, and, you know, unless you look at it closely, you wouldn't realise it even had an engine, but it'll launch itself and fly 100 kilometres. So it's a very handy little machine. You can launch yourself and shut the engine down and go soaring in it. And that man's very inventive, and there are lots of different things. We've got a few examples of them in the museum. So if you can ever get in, we'll show you. There's a Koenig 3-cylinder radial there, and on what's it on? Can you remember? Oh, I can't remember what it is, but it's on one of the self-launching.
The Sunbird.
And there's the Sunbird, which
self-launching.
Yeah,
Wooden glider.
Yeah. So yeah, no engines. People have been putting little engines in gliders for a long time. In you know, not a lot of them, but probably you know, I believe even motorbike engines have been used, and they put a Ford engine in a Pawnee tow plane, and the big advantage of having a Ford engine in a Pawnee tow plane is that it's water cooled, whereas an air-cooled engine is on full power at low speed during the climb with a glider on the back. And then as soon as it drops the glider, he wants to get back on the ground immediately to launch the next one. So he stuffs the nose down and speeds up and closes the throttle so that the engine is now in full cooling mode in high speed. And so they have to keep power up on the descent. Yeah, they do. This is in ideal circumstances, but and in the Ford engine being water cooled, they found that the flight times were shorter than the big continental Lycoming engines in a Pawnee by using a Ford 6-cylinder V engine with water cooling.
What would be
the biggest
average tow height that you'd use?
Oh, we normally go to 2,000 feet, or unless there's any reason to go above 2,000 feet. Yeah, that's normal. Winch launches, you know, at Armidale we used to get 1,000 feet if we were lucky. Yeah. And the Kookaburra's performance was such that you'd sort of turn onto a downwind leg, and if you were lucky, you got a turn in, a full 360-degree turn, and then finish your downwind leg and land, you know, on the short strip. So that was what we used to, but that was for 6 bob, 6 shillings for 10 minutes of flying. It was a lot cheaper than these days, where you pay about $45 for the average member's launch these days.
Wind launching.
Yeah, we'd like to see them. The Geelong Club has still got a winch, and they're talking about getting it out and firing it up again. It'd be very nice if they do.
Lot cheaper than the tow.
Was the Golden Eagle the only aircraft that Jeff Richardson designed?
The Golden Eagle, yes, that's right.
The only one, was it? The only one.
Oh, it was the only one. As far as I know, that was the only one he designed, yes.
And built.
And
now, did he work at CAC after the war?
He did work with Commonwealth Aircraft Factories, yes, I believe so. I believe he did, yeah. He, in designing that glider, and building his glider, at the time there were no suitable glues available, so he made his own casein glue.
Okay, yeah.
And that glue has stood the test of time. That glider is still very sound.
Yeah, I think he became the sales engineer for the CAC series crop duster.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay.
If that's the same Jeff Richardson, that's what.
Yeah.
I don't
Yes,
know.
yes. No, that would be very interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm trying to tie the two up, you know, whether he's the one that did it. Yeah.
So,
Mm.
yeah. Well, he was, I believe that he was only in his late 20s. So when he designed and built the Golden Eagle.
Early 20s.
So, yeah, he wasn't an old,
he's a very young
guy then.
fella.
So he certainly could have been around after the war for many years doing things, but I don't know what he did, which club he flew with, and that.
Okay, no, neither do I. I just tried to heard the name and I thought that was the same guy. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Dave. Yeah. Okay.
Well, it's a lovely glider.
Okay. Good.
Yeah. Yep. So gliding is still fun.
He had pieces out of a Mustang in it. You know, the trim where you look at the trim in it, and if you're a Mustang pilot, you recognise it immediately.
Well, that's Seabull the Mustang.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah.
I can't remember a Mustang rudder trim you're talking about. Elevator trim, I mean. Elevator trim. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the
I
elevator.
wouldn't have aileron trims.
Oh, there you are. It's a possibility.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Jenny and we're flying our glider these days. Average launch cost $45. Our average flight time is 3 hours. So we're flying for $15 an hour.
Wow.
So bad.
And
Pretty good.
all doing it. Absolutely wonderful. Doing last year we did 33 flights and got exactly 100 hours. So
Fantastic.
most of this was on cross-country flights. You know, we do a lot of cross-country flights in it, and we at the vintage rallies, that sort of thing. Last year, when we went across the border during COVID, we'd been flying at Horsham. Jenny competed in the Horsham comps over there for Victorian comps. So after the comps were over,
it was before the comps.
Before the comps.
It was after our Christmas camp.
I flew the KA6 over the border. I did have a permit to go into South Australia, but Jenny went across in the truck with a trailer, and I think the plan was you're going to present my thing as well, were you? Or the policeman at the border. But
had an empty glider trailer behind me.
Can I ask what's the highest anyone's been?
No, don't ask.
Yeah.
Don't ask Jenny, because I was a bit crook one day and it was my turn to fly, and Jenny went to 16,000.
Wow.
17,000.
That's incredible, isn't it?
Well, in a thunderstorm or something.
No, it was just an outstanding day.
Thermal.
Absolutely amazing. No,
Thermal
it was
to
thermals.
18,000.
Cloud-based was, that's what cloud-based was. It was.
I can't stand up at that hard punch, let's fly a flaming aeroplane.
Yeah, I tell you what, if you were looking to get above the turbulence, it would have been hard work that day.
We used to fly the Fokker Friendships at 16,000 feet, generally, on the way to Wagga and back and that sort of stuff, Miranda Griffiths and that, down through the same area. And we would have passed under her at about 2,000 feet below her, actually.
No, I did have to descend to go into.
Oh, yeah, no, but you were.
Trial steps for Wagga.
It had a low carbon imprint, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But the Australian record is over 30,000 feet.
Wow.
But that's in Wave out of Canberra.
Mm.
Yeah, Jeff Pinson.
That's pretty good. No pressurisation.
It's pretty amazing.
People at the Grampian Soaring Club out near Ararat, they get to 30,000 feet every winter in the westerlies that are causing the wave over the Grampians. So 30,000 feet is usually about the best height in Australia for the year. 30, 32, 33,000, somewhere in that area. But of course, the Perlan project gets up to
over 70,000
over 70,000 feet.
And their aim is 90,000 feet. They're still working on that, but they believe they can do it. This is in the Andes in South America, and they've already been over 70,000 feet. And they're still developing their pressurised glider to get above 90,000. They believe the wave goes to over 90,000 feet.
You get trouble with low level wind shear? You wouldn't get
Sorry?
A low level wind shear, yeah, like on approach?
Yes. Well,
that could be nasty.
Yeah, we haven't. We've had some interesting times with that, with the downburst out of a thunderstorm, for instance. Sometimes things overdevelop during a day. You're out on a cross country, you're coming home, you see this thunderstorm develop. We had one at Bordertown one year. I was up in the K6, had come back home from a couple of 100k cross country, and there was a large queue there. I thought, I'll go and have a look at that. And the lift I got was just so powerful that it frightened me. And I thought, okay, I've got to depart from this, find some sink, get down and land, get on the ground. And by the time I was on the ground, the outburst, the downburst was happening. And fortunately, I was able to land into wind. Every person on the aerodrome was there waiting for me. And as soon as the glider pulled up, which didn't take very long, they all leapt on it and they said, don't get out, stay there.
You'll get airborne
and they
again.
pushed the glider, manhandled it into a hangar so that it didn't blow away. But at the same time, we had a two-seater up, a K7, and he was returning from Mandala to the south. And he started his because of this downburst, he didn't quite make it. He couldn't, there's a railway line and the highway just before the aerodrome boundary, and he didn't have enough height to cross it, so he had to land in the paddock on the other side of the railway line and the highway, and the trailer had to go out, and they kept it very firmly tied down until the wind stopped, and then de-rigged it, brought it home. Yeah.
It's a
serious issue.
Oh, yeah. Is there such a thing as instrument flying anywhere in gliding?
It's not permitted. Cloud flying is not permitted in gliding in Australia.
No, but in the world?
Yes, it is. It is permitted in Britain, in Europe. You get your cloud flying endorsement in Britain, and you can happily fly in clouds.
So how would you'd have battery operated instruments, I suppose?
Yes.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Certainly.
Most on a day when the cumulus are large, then it's usually bumpy in the clouds. So it's not a good idea to cloud fly in Australia because it's illegal, but elsewhere, and that the power pilots are generally, I used to fly Barons on charter, and there's no way you'd take a load of passengers through a cloud if you could avoid it, because it was as rough as blazes in the cloud on those sorts of days. Yeah. And so chances are that you might be the only glider in there, but it's not very comfortable when you can't see very fast. You can't see your wingtips. So it's not a lot of cloud flying takes place except in places where it is allowed, where you know that there's no other traffic.
Of course.
Two things. In the chat, Roderick's put a link to the Taurus electric powered glider, which is quite fascinating. I had a look at that a while ago. And Peter, exactly what's your next event? It's a gliding related event, but I'm not quite sure.
You caught me on the hop. What's his name? Garrett Russell. Dave, I don't know whether you remember Garrett Russell. He's our next speaker. he'll be our guest speaker at our October meeting at the end of the month. He'll be talking about gliding as well. So he's
Excellent.
he's keen to. He couldn't log in tonight because he's got a AGM or something he's getting ready for, and he's keen to see the recording of tonight's presentation, of your presentation. So.
Well, say good day to him for us, if you would, please. Yeah.
And spread the word, Dave, to the gliding people. We'd love to have them. If I send the, if we send a link to you, you can spread it around whoever you like.
Mm.
Yep. Okay, good. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah.
On more ordinary gliding, I've been 12,500 feet on thermals out of Bond Springs, north of Alice Springs.
Oh, yes, yeah. What was that in?
I forget now, probably this Schweizer SGS 134. I've flown 18 gliders of 11 different types. And I don't know,
Yeah.
launches, but only about 45 total flying gliding hours. That is.
Yeah. So that was with the Alice Springs Gliding Club.
Yes.
Yeah.
Gliding at Kingaroy Soaring Club, and a bit in Scotland when I was on a holiday one time, and did a couple other places.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, we used to go up to the up to Kingaroy. I was at Armidale, and we used to go up to Kingaroy for the Queensland comps. I think they were Easter comps back in the 70s. Yeah, and wonderful flying around there. Fantastic.
Yeah. Did you know,
They get a good southwesterly wind and they'd go soaring off the Bunya Mountains.
Yeah, off the Bunyas. Yeah, well, there's one day there, actually, the day I did my Gold Sea and Diamond flight, which was a bit of an achievement in those days. These days, it's a lot easier because of the performance of the glider. But I just got into a shear wave from the southwest on the wrong side of the Bunyas, down to the southwest of the Bunyas. A bit of a shear wave, and it stuck me up to 15,600 feet, I think it was. So, and that was just in sheer wave. I don't think there was any orographic influence to the southwest of where I was flying, the direction the wind came from. So that helped.
Did you have oxygen?
oh, don't ask. Yes, if it was
next question. It's okay. I was 19.
Good lungs.
Yep.
Oh,
but I think what actually was happening, it was fairly gentle and not strong lift, but as I got up the top and I decided I didn't like this flying up here without oxygen, so I went faster and faster and faster, and slowly worked my way back down again. But I don't think I was fully aware of the effects of true airspeed versus wind indicated airspeed in those days, and I was sort of thinking later on, well, yeah, the glider handled that pretty well, because the true airspeed was probably 30 or more knots faster than what the airspeed indicator was showing.
You need a Mac meter.
The use of oxygen has been mandatory now for decades, but I think in that day it was not actually above 10,000 feet. But now you must use oxygen above 10,000 feet. We've got no business being there. And any badge flights you did would not be recognised if you didn't have oxygen in the glider, if you went above 10,000 feet.
On that particular flight, I went round the turn point at Jimbo and headed back towards Warwick. And I just wasn't going to make it. The thermals were dying. So I was heading into Oki to land there, and would have to look forward to a retrieve of the glider heading into Oki. And I got into the circuit area at Oki. A sea breeze was coming in. So I thought I might give that a try. I was only about 2,000 feet, and I went across to the sea breeze, and I saw that sea breeze from Oki to Warwick, 53 miles, watched the sunset from 6,000 feet, didn't realise I had a problem. and landed in the dark at Warwick and got my gold C and diamond gold in the old Club Two-Seater. So that was a bit of a red letter day. That
wouldn't
one.
happen these days. The badge lady would not let you get it these days.
That was my next question. What about night flying?
Yeah. No, not flying's not
Not
allowed. No, it's strictly VFR. Yeah, these days. Yeah, and those days, the town
You
of
can't fly
Ballarat.
VFR at night.
Oh, that's right, night VFR. Yeah, they don't night VMC. I don't think we're allowed to do that in gliders.
Well, the two-seat glider that I learnt to fly in, which our club, the Newcastle Gliding Club, imported, was fully fitted with night flying lights. You know, it had all the lights on it.
And it had an electric turn and bank.
And it had an electric turn and bank. Yeah.
No attitude to go to though, of course.
That's because in Poland they do fly at night.
Blimey.
They'd have to have an attitude indicator, surely.
Oh, well, you can get away with a turn and bank. Yep. I wouldn't know, but I'm sure you can.
Right.
Yeah.
Glider flying might be non-VFR, but I also landed at Warwick one day after 4 o'clock when you get those red hazy dust storms with the sun on the dust. And I can assure you that I came into Warwick VFR, not only flying the glider, but praying like hell.
Oh, yep. Well, it's funny that you say that actually, because on that particular flight that I was talking about, when a guy named Murray Knight, I don't know if you've ever heard of Murray Knight, he was flying up in those days, a nice fella, and he said, oh, I'm going to go to Jimdor and back from the Gold Sea. Nothing better to do, and knew nothing about the area. So said, oh, I'll come too in the Bergfalk. So anyway, we headed off.
He was flying boomerang.
He was flying a boomerang, which is a lot better than a Bergfalk. But we headed off, and would you believe, after about 30 or 40 miles probably, we're in this big dust storm, Judy. It was just like you're saying, you couldn't see.
Can't see.
Sort of a small cone. Yeah, a small cone underneath you. And I found a rode a railway line and followed it to Pittsworth. And it was well off track, but I was able to, after a while, identify Pittsworth, and then it started to clear from the west, and I was able to continue on the trip. But I was just around.
What about your compass?
Oh yeah, I had a compass. Yeah.
Didn't you refer to your compass?
Pre-flight planning.
I can see where the expression "flying by the seat of your pants" could have originated.
Well, the guy, I said, the Bergfalk doesn't have a compass. We're sort of heading on a track there. I suppose it was a track of about 330, whatever it was, 310. Anyway, I said, I don't have a compass. And the guy said, I've got a compass. So he went over to his car and he brought back one of those flat car compass things that you stuck on your windscreen. So, thanks very much. I've got a compass. So anyway, we got out lost in this dust storm. So I held the compass up and all the fluid ran out in my hand. It was useless. So that didn't help. Yeah. Like I say, the seat of the pants. But yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Sounds like it.
Yeah.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, the talk was good and the chat was better. So it's great to have everybody, and thanks for coming.